some of my most like proud moments in terms of producing was some of that stuff that we worked up with them, and that was kind of a lesson in that too. But I
feel like it's cool also that you guys are brothers, and that like, you know, brothers can like kind of hash things out and fight sometimes, but still forgive each other. You know what I mean? Like,
well,
unless you're the Gallaghers, but
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. Well, we used to have arguments, like band arguments, in the basement of our parents' house, and our mom would like freak out because she'd hear us screaming at each other, and she was like very much like a peace and harmony, like, please, I don't want my sons to like grow up hating each other or whatever. Probably like, saw the Gallagher brothers on the news and was like, that's not going to be my kids. And so she'd like come down and be like, stop fighting. And we would just be like, Mom, we're just talking about like a song, and it was, and we'd scream at each other, and then we just get over it, and because that's just what you do, So there's like a sibling rivalry, but in a band setting, it's like easy to get over because you're never really going to cross any lines, and that's has made it probably easier for Brendan and I, and Dom too, by the way,
to like have just like frank discussions about stuff. If there's something that it's like something where like if I was engineering for somebody else, I might not be comfortable being like, oh, I don't think that works, or like we should do it like this, just because I'm a like non-confrontational person. But with Sean, I feel a lot more comfortable just being like, hey, let's not do that, and then just move on.
Totally. And that's a really good thing to have. And I've also learned like that we kind of trust each other's ears too, to the extent of where like if one of us has to like, go for the rest of the day or whatever, like if I, have to get home or something, and Bren's like, oh, I'll finish like the rest of the session. And like I kind of know that I'm not going to come back the next day to something that's like crazy and like how did everything get to this place? Like, we sort of have this like really intrinsic like trust in each other, just even sonically. And that probably also comes from like just learning how to use all this stuff as we were doing it. Like, for example, when we were making the first AFT record, when we signed to the label that we were doing in Lowot, I remember on one song there was a bit of a skirmish about using the Spectrasonics 610, and because was that because we were trying to use it as a drum mic, I think, right, or as a room mic, and there was kind of a divide, like whether or not it was working, and that was like a kind of a lesson in like, it's okay if you record it and then you don't end up using it later. That was something that we sort of learned too from each other. Was just like, let's just like try it, and if it doesn't work, because like those things like will just smash the shit out of like everything, and it just sounds like the craziest. I mean, I think
the one at Lowot was also a little bit broken,
but it kind of added
so it distorted in a really fun way.
Yeah, so we used it as a room mic, and it was super super fun, and we ended up using it. I think we just kept it on, but like there was a bit of a debate of whether or not it was working, and I think we realized at some point that we were spending too much time trying to figure out if we should record it, where we could just record it and then not use it later if we really didn't like it.
Yeah, and on the other side of that equation, like if you have an artist that you're working with and they have an idea that you don't think is good, you could always just say, like, rather than like argue with it, it's like, okay, try it, and if it doesn't work, you could show them, listen, it doesn't really work.
Yep,
exactly. So it's always better to try things, and the same thing with anything, like just even making music to begin with. Like people like overthink the creation of music and just even getting started. It's just like, Joe, just start, just try it, and then see and take it from there.
Exactly,
I think that's super important.
Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned distortion, and I actually wanted to ask you guys a bit about distortion because it seems to be your trademark thing. You guys are really good at using distortion in interesting ways. Like, do you have a philosophy? Like, tell me about your thoughts on distortion.
I don't know if personally, if I have like an explicit like philosophy on it. I'm just a big fan of distortion. Yeah. I think partially that, for me, comes from being a fan of like the kind of Elephant Six bands, like the like Neutral Milk Hotel and Apples in Stereo and Olivia Tremor Control and stuff like that. I was really into that sort of like overblown cassette recorder kind of sound. And so I think that sort of translated even as we started trying to make more like hi-fi music. I was still like, I need some kind of like saturation just to like kind of feel the excitement. And it sort of, I don't know, it just kind of became a thing that we just sort of like somewhat of a go-to. Some might say a crutch.
Right. We also come from like the Chad Blake school as well.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like he loves SansAmp and that kind of thing. And I remember being young and thinking that SansAmp was just like whatever the basic thing that came in Pro Tools. And I didn't really think, I just didn't really take it very seriously. And then when you start listening to those records and he's like using that and like in these really interesting, colorful ways. And it's just like, oh, wow, like that, like you can do that with SansAmp. Like it's crazy. And so we kind of started kind of going that route too. Especially in mixing and stuff like that. But even, you know, in just when we're, you know, actually recording something, console distortion is really something we're kind of obsessed with, especially on the last record that we made with our band. Yeah. There's a lot of console distortion.
Going through the Neve, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, which you can't really beat that. That particular
good for you guys.
Yeah, I honestly like that's Ted's Neve. It's an 8014, and it's to be able to like learn and make records on a console like that. I do not take that for granted at all because it's what a sound. Like it's kind of crazy, and you can put almost anything through it and it's going to sound good. Like. It's kind of unbelievable. So we kind of like at some point we started like leaning more into that, and I think it kind of did become a kind of part of our thing. And even in production with other artists.
We also got really obsessed with the Sound Toys Decapitator, which is just like
another Chad Blake thing. I think too. He's very
it's a classic. Everyone uses the Decapitator, right?
The greatest plugin. It's just so good. So there's. Sometimes I try to hold back with it, but there's definitely been periods where I'm just like, I'm just going to put a little bit of Decapitator on everything.
Honestly, we were working on the newest AFT record, Fragile Tomorrow, and I was at Low Watt kind of doing some you know, vocals and stuff like that, and I would just do just bounces to send to Brendan and the rest of the guys, and honestly, like, there's really no reason for me to do it at all, but I would just throw a shitload of Decapitator on my voice and just, like, completely, like, just blow it out, and just because I like to hear how it sounds on my voice, you know? So, we use it on everything. I mean, kick drums, you know, vocals, guitars, even, like, it's a big mixing tool for you, I think, Brendan.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's kind of we use it on bass. Like it's huge. So there's a lot of distortion on the stuff that we do, and
on our the last Fragile Tomorrow record, we also I got like a little $20 like cassette recorder and just started using that as a room mic, which was pretty fun. So that kind of became a part of that too.
That's cool.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, we've also like reamped through like vocals and stuff through guitar pedals and stuff. So,
and then the cassette thing too was cool because that record was specifically kind of a little bit more like hip hop influenced, a lot more like kind of groove heavy stuff, and so the idea was to try and like saturate things in kind of more unique ways. And particularly, we didn't want any of the guitars to sound like guitars. That was like actually a very like specific thing. So any kind of distortion and stuff was what we wanted to meet it with, like a more unique sound, so that it wasn't just like, you know, heavy guitars, fuzzy guitars. It was like a very specific thing we were searching for to try and like make things just sound. So there's a lot of like little 8-bit sounding things on the guitar parts on that record, just to kind of like create this weird wash of things, so you don't really know what the instrument is. Was kind of the thing. So we use a lot of distortion in those ways, and then like a lot of you know, a lot on kick drums and stuff like that. And Mitch Easter mixed that record, and I know he was I think he was also probably distorting a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
'Cause he does that
Nice.
as well.
Do you have a favorite flavor on the decapitator? Like I know there's like the A, the E, the.
Well, usually I kind of stick to A and then just kind of like figure out a sound from there. I don't really venture out
There's
too
one
much.
that I tend to go to for like more low end stuff, but I can't remember. I want to say it might be E, but I'm not totally sure off the top of my head. But yeah, I do.
Whatever
I do
works.
have some like go tos. Yeah,
It is really whatever
Amazing.
works though. Yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
true.
yeah.
Whatever sounds good, and that's really easy to like. You get to a point too where you just kind of know when something sounds good, and you don't really mess with it too much. The best is when you find something like almost immediately, and you don't have to really alter anything, and you're just like, well, okay, I'm not changing that. Like that's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, I have to stop myself sometimes from messing with things that sound good. It's like, no, don't put the EQ on it.
Yeah.
Don't compress it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think also we one thing is that we try not to be like too precious with anything, which kind of goes with I think the distortion and stuff, because sometimes it's like, oh, we could probably clean this up, but like it sounds cool. And yeah, so I think trying not to be too precious about sounds is a good thing, because I mean we've definitely gone down the rabbit holes of like tweaking something for an hour and a half, and then it's like you just kind of undo what you did, and it's like, oh, this sounded way better an hour ago.
Well, so like with Socher, I think maybe Bren, you were using amps for most of your guitars on that, right? And you were
No, actually.
oh,
I
so
was
we
doing,
were both just going direct and then using IRs for all the guitars on that. And I think the initial like idea was to let's just get mostly dry direct stuff, and kind of add effects and stuff like that on later. For the most part, like obviously if there was something that needed to have a certain sound, we'd use a pedal or whatever. But like the general idea was to sort of shape things later. But like what ended up happening is that I would just kind of run through my setup and find a sound, or Brendan would do the same, or I would like play something direct and add some stuff onto it, whatever, and not really with the intention of keeping it, just to kind of have something in context. And then what would start happening is we would just go, oh, that sounds really good, let's just print it, and then we print it and use it. And that's like what Bren's saying, is not being too precious. Like that was kind of a lesson in that too. Like, if it sounds good, then maybe
Then
just like
good.
commit to it and be cool with it.
And then you'll finish it faster also.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we
Definitely.
if we had employed any other approach to that with this particular project, I think we'd still be working on it right now. But it was a matter of like, we knew we had the songs and they felt really good. We knew we wanted to get it done rather quickly, so we just sort of said, we're just gonna like go with our gut, commit to stuff, and like and see how it sounds. And it ended up, it's maybe my favorite sounding thing that we've done so far, like as a creative project outside production stuff. But like it was really just like having to commit to things and living with things is a big lesson that we've learned from making records and doing stuff as we go along.
Nice. So do you guys do mixing, or do you send out for mixing, or tell me a bit about that?
A little bit of both. I think we sort of like gradually got into mixing things.
It's mostly you, Brendan.
Yeah, I'd say mostly been our own projects, but I've mixed a handful of things that we've produced also. Actually, you know what? It might be the opposite.
No, I
of
think
that,
it's the
now that I
opposite,
think about
actually,
it.
yeah.
We've mixed more stuff that we've produced and actually sent off more often for our own projects.
We sometimes we recommend that people send out to somebody else, because I think there's something to be said for like having a dedicated mix engineer and somebody whose sole purpose in that project is mixing, because it brings a new perspective to it. So we do like to do that, and that's something that we learned from Ted, actually, because Ted doesn't like to mix projects that he produces unless there's really a kind of a necessity for that. But at the same time, a really good example of that working really well was when he did the first Jukebox the Ghost record. And they weren't signed yet. They had a very small budget, and he produced the record and engineered it, and they really didn't have much budget for anybody to mix it. So he ended up mixing it himself, and then they got signed to Yep Rock, and that became like maybe their biggest record.
Yeah.
And so it kind of goes to show that sometimes, you know,